What's going on, guys? Welcome back to the TCG Empire YouTube channel. Today we are taking a look at the very first 151 deck, Alakazam EX. Now, Alakazam EX is a deck and card that really has something that is unique in the Pokemon TCG. We've never had this before. With Dimensional Hand, you do 120 damage, and you can use this attack from the bench. So, we've never had the ability to attack from the bench before. And Alakazam having 310 HP, it's really tough for your opponent to handle that in the active, as well as, them also having to have a boss in order to attack this because you're attacking from the bench. So you also have the ability to use Mind Jack, which does 90 plus 30, which means you can max out at 240 damage. But we are pairing this with cards like Klefki as well as Mimikyu. Now, this is inspiration from Andrew Mahone's list. I did take a couple of cards out and change some things, but just to my liking. But overall, credit to Andrew. I just wanted to showcase this list just so you guys had a full, aspect of it for those who view my channel and might not have seen Andrew Mahone's channel. So, Klefki with the Mischievous Lock. As long as this Pokemon's in your active spot, basic Pokemon in play, both yours and your opponent's, have no abilities except for Mischievous Lock. So what this means is that you can keep this in the active, meaning your opponent can't use things like Comfey, they can't use Greninja, they can't use Lumineon, they can't use any ability that's on a basic Pokemon. And in hindsight, you get to lead this in the active while you attack from the bench with Alakazam. Now, you are only hitting 120 damage, but this can add up over time. And you also have the Mimikyu, where you do have the Safeguard, where you prevent all damage done to this Pokemon by attacks from your opponent's Pokemon EX and Pokemon V. So this can single-handedly solo a lot of decks if they are only playing EX Pokemon. If you play against Charizard and they get Charizard out and, their Charmanders are gone, they have nothing that they can attack with, meaning this Mimikyu is safe to take no damage, which means your opponent's not, they have to play boss in order to get around it. Otherwise, they're not taking a prize or dealing damage. And then we also do have a Spiritomb. Spiritomb is in here just so that way you can prevent basic Vs from having abilities. This gets shut off when Klefki is in the active, but usually you get all three out just so you can pivot between what you want, but in certain matchups you might get two out of the same thing. Against Lost Box, 2 Klefki is usually optimal just because it means if they play Escape Rope, you can switch into another Klefki and you never have to waste anything else. We are also playing the Barrel just for draw, and then we also have a fun unique card, which is the Block Snorlax. Block says as long as this Pokemon is in your active spot, your opponent's active Pokemon can't retreat. So if your opponent is playing something like Lugia maybe, and they are out of Jet Energies, or they're playing a deck that doesn't run Switch or they don't run Penny, you can actually punish them and actually promote the Snorlax in order to lock, their Pokemon in the active, and they have to waste a supporter for the turn in order to get out of the block. So overall, super solid. And then we are running the Colress engine just because it does help kind of get rid of clunky hands and makes everything better. So as always, the deck list will be posted right here so you guys have a full clean view of it. It will also be in the description just so you guys have a full clean list if you guys want to copy and paste it into live. Again, 151 is live as of today, so we will be having more content with it. But as always, if you guys do enjoy today's video, do me a favor, smash the like button, subscribe, turn on post notifications. Otherwise, enjoy the gameplay, and thank you so much for all of the support. I greatly appreciate you guys. And with that being said, I'll catch you guys later. Alrighty, guys, getting into the very first game with Alakazam EX. We're going to see exactly what we can do in this matchup. So we do get to go first, which means that we do have the chance for the Rare Candy Alakazam into turn 2, which means we can start doing some good damage. And speaking of Alakazam, we do draw 2 of them. Sadly, no basic, but all is well. So looking at this hand, we start Klefki. We do have Fog Crystal as well as Ultra Ball. So not looking too bad for us. Starting Klefki, perfect against a lot of decks. My opponent is not able to use that Squawk ability, so we actually are in a good spot. So we will use that Fog Crystal, grabbing the Abra. We'll play down the Abra, and we'll use the Ultra Ball. getting rid of the Lost City as well as the Super Rod. And you know what? We're gonna try and go for a couple of setup cards. So we'll grab the Bidoof, and then we can attach to the Abra, and then we do have the ability to attach to the Abra again on the following turn. And then it all is about just setting up. So my opponent starting that Squawkabilly usually isn't too rough, but because we do have the ability to kind of lock them out, we are able to attack. So my opponent just attaching and attacking, and now we are in a good spot using that Professor's Research, and this hand not looking too good, not looking too bad. I think what we'll do here is just kind of get the other setup mons that we might want. We can use the Mimikyu, use the Bibarel. We could play Switch now that the Squawkabilly can't do anything. But I think right here I'm just going to pass. If we draw an Ultra Ball or something next turn, we can get the Alakazam out, but I'm not sure if I want to dump 2 rare candies, so my opponent going for the Motivate again. So it seems like their hand is clunked, which means that we are doing the right thing. You can use the Switch to burn a card, use the Bibarel, getting us a Battle VIP pass, and I think in order to progress, we're going to have to discard 2 of those rare candies. And now what we can do is go Abra, use the Fog Crystal, just make sure that we do have 2 more rare candies in here, and we do. So we're looking pretty okay with those. So we do get the Psychic Energy, and just to, you know, kind of put some damage, we'll just keep using Joust while my opponent keeps using Motivate, and we can kind of set up from there. So there's the Ekans. So it seems as though my opponent is playing Arbok. Mimikyu probably is going to be the star of this, so not looking too bad. And we do get the Alakazam, which means now all we need is the rare candy. So what we can do here, Ultra Ball, we'll just get rid of the Mimikyu as well as the Klefki. Yeah, we'll get rid of those 2. I should have another Mimikyu in deck, and I do. So we can fail the search, and then we can actually use Industrious Incisors for 2, hitting us Colress Experiment and Energy. Use the Colress, getting us. We'll get Colress. Ultra Ball can thin, and then we'll grab the Escape Rope as well. And then we can just attack again with Mischievous Look. Or, I'm sorry, with Joust for 10 damage. And now we're looking pretty good. We just need to make sure that we can hit 2 of those rare candies. Then we can start attacking from the bench, dealing 120 damage per turn. So my opponent not doing too much. So there is the Motivate again, putting us to 40. And now we do hit the rare candy, which is exactly what we needed. We can rare candy into the Alakazam. We can use the Colress in order to see a couple more cards. So we can grab the Alakazam, and then we'll grab the Iono as well. And then we can attach, and we just need to find the other Ultra Ball. But aside from that, we can just attack for 120. We can actually KO the Squawkabilly, and my opponent won't be able to KO the Klefki. But after the fact, then we can promote the Mimikyu, and my opponent isn't going to be able to attack the Mimikyu. So my opponent going into Switch, attaching a 3rd energy, playing Iono. And we draw 6 brand new cards. There's the Radiant Greninja as well. So my opponent can use Acid Spray and actually take the knockout. But it's not looking too good for what my opponent is deciding. So my opponent getting rid of Path to the Peak and Dark. grabbing that Arbok, and they are going to be able to hit 150 damage. And I believe I have to discard 2 cards. So I will discard the Fog Crystal and the Spiritomb. And unfortunately, we do 3-shot Arbok, so that is something to keep in mind. But if my opponent can only keep attacking and can't win via prizes, we should be okay. So what I'm going to do here is just attack for 120. And we actually can take a knockout on the Arbok next turn if we use this Mind Jack, because we'll do 369, 180 plus 120, hitting for 300 total. So, and the most my opponent will be able to do, they can potentially build up enough to hit 300 damage, but that's all that they can do. And there's quite a bit of cards that they're going to have to look for. So there's the boss's orders. So my opponent bringing up Abra, going for the Fangs for 300. We'll just get rid of the Battle VIP Pass and Ultra Ball. And now what we can do is we can promote the Alakazam. My opponent shouldn't be able to KO us next turn. We will use the Industrious Incisors for 1, and we just have to be wary of our board. But what we can do here, we use the Mind Jack for 180. Take 2 prize cards, and then we can start setting up even more on my opponents. My opponent promotes the Radiant Greninja. I believe we have a boss's orders left. We are down 2. I believe there's 3. So there is a Panic Mask, or Spirit Mask. And my opponent just trying to make sure that we, discard cards from our hand. So there's the concealed cards. And if Snorlax is in here and not in the prizes, we actually can lock my opponent in the active. But I think what I'm going to do here, we could Iono, putting my opponent to a bit of a disadvantage, which I don't hate the idea of doing. We can also retreat. I'm going to bench the Mimikyu. And then, let's see. My opponent could hit me for 300. But that doesn't quite knock out. And if we do find the boss's orders next turn, we're in a good spot. So I can Mind Jack. And then what's the best way to go about this? I think what I'll do now, just because it means it's less cards that I potentially lose, I'm going to attach to the Klefki, because I could potentially boss the Squawk and actually deal the 10 damage to it. So we'll go Iono. Drawing us 4 cards. And we do actually get Escape Rope as well. And what we'll do here is just use Mind Jack for 180. We are going to be able to take a prize card. We do get the block Snorlax. So what I'm thinking is, if my opponent hits me for 300... and there's the Iono. So if my opponent hits me for 300, I still live, and I actually can take 2 prizes on the Squawkabilly. And I think I'll trade, favorably. So my opponent going to be able to use that Industrious Incisors. And if my opponent fills his bench as well, we can actually take the KO on the Darkrai. But I think the most important thing is going to be, let's see. I have an escape rope left. So my opponent can discard an energy. Thankfully, they don't. So I think what I do here, we hit another Alakazam as well. So we'll use the Industrious Incisors for 1. We get Colress. Let's see. I need 2 energy left. So there's 3, there's 6. I could have 2 energy left. We'll use the Colress. I believe I've actually lost zoned a couple energy as well. So that is something to keep in mind. So we'll grab the rare candy and the Colress, only leaving 3 cards in the deck. We haven't lost zoned any energy as well, so I can actually take a look here and check. We'll get rid of the Alakazam as well as the rare candy. And I don't have any energy left, which means that I do have 2 energy prized. So this is going to be a bit tricky. I do have a boss's orders left, so I could take a knockout. And then my opponent can knock out with Darkrai. But then Mimikyu just stalls out. Let's see. My best bet, honestly, is for my opponent to bring up this Darkrai and go from there, so I think that's what we'll go for. We'll use the escape rope. My opponent is going to be forced to bring up something. My opponent does play Switch, so if he gets the Darkrai V-Star out, he actually can, you know, bring up what they want to. But I think what I'm going to do here is promote the Mimikyu, and then we'll just attack for 120, hoping my opponent doesn't have an evolution plus boss, and if they do, then we lose. But in the sense of next turn, we do have the boss's orders to take, you know, a prize card. So things not looking too bad. So there's the Arbok. Does my opponent have the boss's orders plus the energy? Oh, and there is Iono. My opponent going to be able to Iono us to 2. But due to us, you know, having the boss in deck, we actually are going to be able to set up and KO this Squawkabilly for the next turn. So my opponent using the Menacing Fangs, discarding our 2 cards. Now we have the draw for turn. We can use the Barrel, drawing us the last of the cards. Use the boss's orders into the Squawkabilly, and just like that, use the Dimensional Hand for 120, dealing 260 damage total to the Squawk, taking 2 prize cards, and calling us the game. So that was game number 1. Let's get right into a game number 2 and see if we can do the same exact thing. Alrighty guys, getting into the second game here, going to see if Alakazam can pull its weight and do the same exact thing as we did last game. So we do win the coin flip, so we are able to go first. We are playing against Berry Poke TCG. So let's see what they have going for us. So we do have the Manaphy start as well as Abra. I think what we'll do, we're probably playing against Charizard. I don't think Manaphy is going to be too needed. I don't want to start the Abra though and risk it getting KO'd or something potentially. In case my opponent is playing something maybe like Lost Box. So that is something to keep in mind. So my opponent actually is playing Lost Box. So we do top deck the Psychic, which means that we do gain the ability to actually use Fog Crystal. We'll grab the Klefki, and we're actually going to be kind of hyper aggressive here. That way if my opponent plays Escape Rope, we're still in a good spot. So I'm going to get rid of the Lost City and the Ultra Ball in order to grab double Klefki, because if my opponent plays Escape Rope, we still can switch into the Klefki. and then we have some setup for the following turns. So this means my opponent has to hit Colress off of the board. And speaking of, we do have our own Colress for the next turn. So a bit of an aggressive turn when it comes to it, but my opponent not going to be able to really use anything. They can't use Comfies, they can't use the Klefkis, they can't use Greninja. So we are going to be pretty good in this scenario. Now my opponent could play something like Boss's Orders, but it's not going to really fare too well with them. So my opponent getting out the Sableye and the Giratina. Seems as though their Giratina is going to be the way that they choose to, power it up. We could play a couple Choice Belt in this list, but I think being able to kind of wall behind everything that we need is enough. So my opponent benching another Comfey. I'm not too sure if they realize that Klefki is shutting off their whole entire board depending on what they play. So my opponent just going to have to manually attach to Giratina. They're not going to set up Sableye anytime soon. So it's going to be a bit tricky for them. And actually, with hitting 120, we can actually hit 120 into Mind Jack. So my opponent playing Cross Switcher. That is a card I never thought I would see in Lost Tina. That's super interesting. The fact that my opponent just had that is wild. So my opponent is going to be able to, flower selecting here, but they're not going to really gain a lot of momentum. So my opponent is getting rid of a Mirage Gate. I'm so surprised that they just had 2 Cross Switcher in there. So my opponent going for the attach return under the Comfey, so they will be able to, use 2 flower selectings, but we are going to be able to retreat next turn, providing that we hit the energy, and we're going to be able to kind of set up how we want. So there's another Giratina going down. My opponent passes, so now we are on to seeing what we can do, and we're actually going to Professor's Research because it gives us the fresh 7 to look at, and not looking too good for us. We do have the ability to Fog Crystal. Fog Crystal can grab us another energy just so that way we have 2 in hand. And we're going to have to retreat into the Klefki and kind of start building up, as much as we can. So it's pretty much the wait and see game, just stalling my opponents out while I'm setting up, and then I can deal massive amounts of damage if I need to. Alakazam being able to deal 240 damage, so my opponent attaching to the Comfey for some unknown reason. Maybe so that way they do have, an extra energy to retreat, but all is well. So my opponent passes. We do get Mimikyu. Mimikyu actually could be kind of useful against these Giratinas. And there's no supporter that's being played, so I'm not going to Iono my opponent. I don't want to risk giving them, too many cards that they have to work with. And if we do hit an Alakazam, then potentially I feel okay doing it. But again, my opponent not really going to be able to do much. They can use the Giratina and actually use Abyss Seeking if they wanted to feel their Lost Zone, but so my opponent going for the attack, hitting for 30. And we get Bidoof. What we'll do is, get the Bidoof down. And I need to try and set up a bit more. So we will use the Iono. And this will get us not too many playable cards. We do have the Bibarel for next turn. And we do have another Iono. So my opponent wasting 3 energy on the Comfey. We're in a spot. The most that they can do is kind of set up some more, but I don't think that it's going to be too likely for them to do so. We're going to be able to KO this Comfey, and then they can feel their Lost Zone some more potentially, but it's not looking too good. So we do get the Snorlax. We're not going to use that. And what we can do here, use Iono once more. Again, just trying to hit a Rare Candy Alakazam. And just like that, we have the rare candy into the Alakazam. We even have boss's orders. We do have industrious incisors as well, getting another boss's orders, so we can hit for 120. Taking a knockout for the first prize of the game. And just like that, you know, my opponent can Colress into Colress and stuff, but that's really all that they can do. My opponent bringing up Sableye, they are going to be able to use that Scratch, which could be a little bit frustrating to deal with, but again, we'll be able to KO the Sableye as well. So my opponent placing down Manaphy. I'm not too sure what Manaphy is going to help accomplish in this matchup. If anything, it's just going to give us, you know, more damage. 3, 6, 9, 12. We do have the ability to hit 210. If my opponent benches one more Pokemon, we can actually KO a Giratina with Mind Jack, and then next turn we can retreat. My opponent just passing, and we draw a Battle VIP pass. Not going to be too useful. So what we'll do here is use the Colress. Colress will grab us. I believe we have another one in hand. Yeah, we do. So we'll just grab the Abra, the Alakazam, and the Mimikyu. And what we can do here, again, we can just use Mind Jack. I mean, not Mind Jack. We can use, I believe it's Phantom. What is it? Oh, Dimensional Hand. It's my opponent promoting Giratina. They will be able to feel the Lost Zone with being able to use the Lost Impact for 280, but it's not going to, you know, do too much for them. My opponent using Shred. That is okay too. My opponent is going to be able to, you know, deal some damage and deal with these Mimikyus, but it's not quite enough. So what we'll do is promote the Mimikyu. Just so my opponent, you know, is punished if they choose to evolve. What we can do here, we can bench the Abra, attach. We'll use the Colress just to thin some more cards. We'll grab the Energy, the Super Rod, and the Fog Crystal. And we can use the Dimensional Hand for 120. And the nice thing is that if my opponent does decide to, you know, evolve, they're punished. If my opponent decides to just stay in and use Shred, he's going to get KO'd, which means that's 3 energy down. We're at 2 prizes. We can promote a Klefki to continue shutting down. We have the potential to draw another rare candy. So we're looking like we're in a pretty good spot here. And the only way that my opponent is KOing something like Alakazam is with Star Requiem, which means that they only get the ability to do that once. So my opponent going for the Switch Cart. Switch Cart, a little bit annoying, but not the end of the world. If worse comes to worse, we can actually use Mind Jack to KO the Giratina, as we'll be hitting 3, 6, 9, 12, 210. So we draw Raihan as well, so Raihan can actually grab us a rare candy or Alakazam, depending on what we get. There's the switch. And due to the aspects of where my opponent's at with only 4 in the Lost Zone, I'm going to come up and Mind Jack this Giratina, simply because it means that we gain the ability to set up more damage on the board. We can take a knockout here. If my opponent decides to overbench and doesn't, you know, set up both of these Giratina V-Stars, then we can just Mind Jack again. My opponent going into the Cramorant. They could hard retreat, and they are. And my opponent having to give up 2 energy here in order to use the Lost Provisions. And honestly, we're going to go right back into Klefki, and we're going to set up exactly how we want to, and my opponent concedes. So I think that pretty much explains the Lost Box matchup, especially something like Lost Tina. You kind of just pivot in and out, and if you need to mind jack, you can. But with that being said, I want to thank you guys for watching today's video. If you did enjoy it, do me a favor, smash the like button, subscribe, turn on post notifications. Let me know down below what you guys think of 151. And with that being said, I will catch you guys on Monday's video. Later.